All right, welcome in. I'm the Kodiak, and today I'm here to talk about why the Raiders will make the playoffs in the year 2024. But before we get into that, I just want to say leave a like if you enjoy, or subscribe if you're not already, and let's get right into it. So, the Raiders, they were a team that had really just been treading water midway through the year. Josh McDaniels completely ruined this franchise and probably set it back a few years from what they were originally doing because when I think about the Raiders under Ziegler and McDaniels, I think about a team that had a really, really confusing direction because, yes, they made some moves that were trying to set them up for the future, but they also made a few moves that I'm just like, okay, this team also wants to rebuild at the same time. Just didn't make a lot of sense, was really confusing. Made some very bizarre personnel choices and ran Derek Carr out of town, which Carr is kind of not really a quarterback that I'd be excited about leading my franchise. But the way they went about it was completely irreparable, completely irresponsible, completely disrespectful for what Carr has done, not just for the Las Vegas Raiders, but for the Oakland Raiders as well. And when I think about what the Raiders are building in Las Vegas, because I live 10 minutes away from that stadium, and this team does not have its luster, the same luster that it used to. Not only just because they've been bad for the past 20 years, but due to the fact that coming to Vegas, you have a bunch of football fans from all over. And I would say only 30% of the people who follow the NFL in Vegas actually cheer for the Raiders. Like, yes, they probably still are the most popular team, but it's a melting pot of sports fandom here, especially when you compare how popular they are compared to the Golden Knights. But the Raiders were a team at the end of last year under Antonio Pierce after Josh McDaniels had been fired that nobody wanted to play. They went into Arrowhead and completely embarrassed the Kansas City Chiefs on their home field on Christmas. And when I think about that game, I'm like, how did this team win the Super Bowl? But the Raiders, their personnel is absolutely great. It's one of the few things that I think Ziegler has done a good job of is setting this team up for future success and not leaving it in a disastrous situation for Telesco. Culturally, yes, but the locker room, they seem close. They all seem like they mold together very well. But you have a few playmakers on defense. That defensive line is going to be very good, especially if Tyree Wilson can figure it out because he's honestly had a disappointing start to his career. But you have now Wilkins. You have Crosby, who is one of the premier edge rushers in the game. And when I think about what the Raiders are doing, it's clear. It is clear that they are trying to build a team that can counteract the Chiefs and trying to be a matchup nightmare for them. And when I think about this team and what they have going for them on offense, there is no way that Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell are the long-term future of this team. But we saw Gardner Minshew this past year, and he can be a solid bridge quarterback. I still think they're going to draft one of Nix or Penix, but I don't know. Whoever the Broncos don't draft is who I think the Raiders will get. Regardless, this team has a lot of really, really good pieces. Talent-wise, this team has been really looking up over the past few years, and they're only going to add to it because I honestly think the Raiders have had a severe lack of talent over the past few years, and it's kind of what's been holding them back from being able to compete with the Chargers when they were insane in the mid-2000s with Rivers and LT, from the Broncos during the Manning years, from the Chiefs now. And yeah, it's kind of been a tumultuous, 2-decade run of bad luck, especially for that franchise. But you've had a lot of really, really poor draft picks over the past few years. And the only thing I can think of is think about this current Raiders team if they hadn't completely whiffed on all their draft picks, like Clelin Ferrell, Jonathan Abram, and Jacobs was not necessarily a whiff, but he probably didn't provide what you would have wanted a first-round running back to provide. Culturally, he was a huge piece of that team, though, so can't really call it a complete failure. And when I think about the Raiders and everything that's happened since 2020, you had guys like Henry Ruggs and you had guys like Damon Arnett. Absolutely embarrassing draft picks. But they didn't have one in 2022 due to the fact that it traded away from Devontae Adams and Tyree Wilson. It was a rough year. Let's just say that. But completely overhauled, completely overshadowed by the fact that when this team has moved to Las Vegas, they have completely whiffed on their first-round picks. I mean, not completely, but it's been bad. It's been really, really bad. So, yeah. And then I didn't even mention Alex Leatherwood. So, when I think about the Las Vegas Raiders, this team is going under a complete culture transformation under Antonio Pierce. They were white hot to end the year last year, and I think that momentum is going to carry over into this year because look at what they're doing. They are going to try to build a run game off the backs of Zamir White and whatever other running back they bring in. They're going to try to play good defense, and they played great defense after Antonio Pierce had taken over. And this is clearly a team that's tight-knit, and I can see them taking over the spots of a lot of the teams that made the wild card this year. I don't know if the Dolphins are going to have the same juice on offense that they had at the start of this year and keep it going for a whole season. The jury's kind of out on Tua. The Steelers, not really seeing anything exciting there. So with a weak AFC landscape and the way this team is set up to be an absolute nightmare to play against, no matter who you are, even if they were to play the 49ers, even if they were to play the Chiefs, even if they were to play the Eagles, even if they were to play the Bills, whoever the best teams in the league are in 2024, I can guarantee that they are not going to go down swinging. They are never, ever going to go down without a fight, and that is the toughest team to play against. They remind me of the Lions during the early Dan Campbell era, but with much more talent and probably a lot more positive variance that's going to go their way. So, without further ado, I think the Raiders will make the playoffs in 2024. Don't think they'll win the division over KC, because KC is too good. But when you have the Chargers that are kind of going under a rebuild, and then the Broncos who are probably punting on the year of 2024, this team, I could see them being a formidable team in next year in the AFC. So I think they're going to make the playoffs. I expect them to make the playoffs, even if Gardner Minshew is their quarterback. I don't care if it's Nick Penix, Minshew, and maybe AOC for a year. I think that they can make the playoffs. So that is going to do it for me, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.